Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rake the Take, a golf betting podcast hosted by me, Chris Lewis. And in this week's episode, we're going to be going over the Charles Schwab Challenge, which takes place at Colonial Country Club. This should be a course that needs little introduction for most PGA Tour fans since they've been playing here many a year over the past few decades. And it's kind of a mainstay throughout the tour for sure. However, it has seen better days as a tournament, kind of similar to the Valspar or the Honda Classic, currently known as the Cognizant Classic. It just isn't as much of a draw for the top tier players as it used to be. So you definitely have some, interesting winners of the past few years, like Davis Riley last year. It's a good opportunity for maybe a lower name player to be able to snag a victory. That is if Scotty doesn't run away this week. But regardless, let's kind of just go over the course and talk about it. It's about 7,000 yards long, so making it one of the shorter courses on the PGA Tour. So any type of player, distance-wise, can really do well here. Distance is not a huge predictor, but accuracy off the tee is still really important. The rough at Colonial can be very penalizing for players if they miss the fairway, and approaching the greens and avoiding the runoff areas around the greens will be important as well. So short game will be important in those cases. However, I will say that chipping from the rough or sieving from the bunker will not be as arduous. Those are not as much as other courses, very penal areas. So yeah, it is very much a complete test from tee to green. The greens can be very difficult to read as well at times, but not to a huge degree in comparison to some other courses that they've seen recently. But despite all of that, it still remains to be a very difficult test for the average PGA Tour player. Kind of just getting into the card now. It's a very small card this week. I didn't really see too much value, but I do like Taylor Moore, and he continues to play really solid golf quietly throughout 2025. He finished last week at the PGA Championship tied for 19th. He gained strokes in all categories that week, which is kind of highlighting how he's having one of his best seasons statistically on the PGA Tour. The main factors for that have been his around the green play, where he ranks in the 90th percentile, and his driving ability, where he ranks in the 80th percentile. He has very good distance off the tee, but he's also made some quiet strides and accuracy this season. The putting has been a struggle at times this year, but overall, he still ranks out as a good putter in the 70th percentile. His main flaw at times has really just been his approach play. But the past 2 weeks, where he's had really good marks in those categories, he now ranks in the 65th percentile on approach, and above average in all distances, between 100 yards and less, 100 to 150, 150 to 200, 200 or more. He ranks above average in all those. So that's really good to see for him, kind of marking that he is very much a complete player at this point. So at 100 to 1, that seems like a very odd number for someone who just played really well at a major championship. This field is not really that impressive outside of the top talent. So I think it's a phenomenal value for him, and he could easily win an event of this stature, given that he's won the Valspar before in tournaments like that. So I really like Taylor Moore this week. Coming back on the card this week is Max McGreevy. He continues to really show good ball striking. Like, he's in the 77th percentile in driving and approach play. So he's always been a very proficient player, with his irons and accuracy off the tee. His weaknesses lie around, the greens, where he ranks 45th percentile and around the green and 27th percentile on putting. The short game this week is generally easier, unless you kind of hit those runoff areas. But with how good his irons are, I don't think that's really going to be that much of an issue. So I think he's a good long shot at 200 to 1, especially given his win equity on the Korn Ferry Tour last year. I think we've got him at much worse numbers than this. So I really like him at 201 in a field I don't really feel like is that different from what we've had him at previously when we've bet him. So I do like Max McGreevy a lot this week. And Grayson Sig, he kind of closes out the card. He's had a rough year this year. The putting has been really bad in the 17th percentile. And he's really not that long off the tee, which has kind of cost him a lot in some events. He's missed 7 of his last 8 cuts. Despite these struggles, he still is showing a lot of good numbers on approach and around the greens, where he ranks in the 70th percentile on approach and the 67th percentile around the greens. Very accurate off the tee still, so that's not an issue. So playing a shorter course like the Colonial that really emphasizes ball striking efficiency, should be good for him. He's at 500 to 1 this week, which is a huge number. And so I just feel like that's a really good punt for a player that, has good ball striking efficiency. And his placements are a good value as well. So, I'm just hoping that he has a good finish. And if he finishes in the top 10 or the top 5, that will lead to a big week. So yeah, that's really it for this tournament. I didn't really see a ton of value, but just to review, Taylor Moore, Max McGreevy, and Grayson Sig. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you soon.